approval.
I apologize.
No, are we?
You're good. We're good.
Okay, so you have the agenda in front of you. Is there any questions or discussions on the agenda? No changes from staff? All right, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make that motion.
I need a second.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the agenda is approved. All right, at this time, item 5 is open forum. Open forum is an opportunity for members of the community to address the planning commission for any items that are not currently on the agenda. Are you here for open forum?
No, don't worry for the.
Okay,
the
all right. If there's anybody online, Natalie will give you instructions on how to get recognized.
Members of the public, if you'd like to participate in the open forum, it looks like you are all on a computer or mobile device. You should be able to access the raise your hand function using either the reactions tab, or sometimes you'll find it under the participants tab. At this time, no one's raising their hand, Mr. Chair.
All right, we'll move on to the meat and potatoes of our agenda item. Or I'm sorry, we have the minutes. Item 6, minutes from November 4th. Commissioner Vanden Eyde, you can, you weren't here, so we won't ask if you have any questions or comments on it. You can abstain from voting. And same with Commissioner Scholak. Drummond or any changes? I didn't note any. All right. Motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make that motion.
And I'll second that motion.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. Okay, now the main course. Item 7A is a public hearing for a preliminary plat for Magnan Acres at 9247 Trail Haven Drive, and involves multiple parcels. And at this time, we'll have the entertain the staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Magnan Acres is a preliminary plat requested by Brandon and Chelsea Magnan. The request will result in 2 buildable lots where there are currently 3 parcels containing 2 buildable lots and 1 unbuildable outlot. So this is a picture of the site location. The outlot is the biggest parcel on the north, highlighted in blue, which is outlot A of Out Called Second Edition. And then the adjacent parcel to the south is 9257 Trail Haven Road, where there is no existing single-family home. And again, immediately south is 9247 Trail Haven Road, where there is an existing single-family home. This is the preliminary plat that's being proposed. The outlot would turn into lot 1 of Magnan Acres, and 9247 and 9257 will be consolidated into a single lot, proposed lot 2. So the preliminary plat will allow for a single family home to be built on proposed lot 1 and will exhaust an unused development right that's currently assigned to the adjacent parcel 9257 Trail Haven. The plat will also result in 9247 and 9257 Trail Haven being consolidated into a single lot where there are no proposed improvements at this time. The preliminary plat consists of 13.89 acres in total, and it is zoned rural residential. Proposed lot 1 will remain 10.38 acres in size. Proposed lot 2 will consolidate 2 legally non-conforming lots to result in 1 conforming lot, 3.51 acres in size. Since no additional lots will result from this plat, no park dedication will be required. So the proposed lots meet or exceed all of our minimum lot standards for the RR district. There is an existing structure on the northeast quadrant of proposed lot 2 that infringes on the rear yard setback of 15 feet. But aerial photos with Hennepin County confirm this structure predates our city code, so it's legal non-conforming. Proposed lot 1 will have a driveway with direct access onto Trailhaven Road. Additional review of the location will occur with the submittal of a driveway permit and will ultimately be approved by Public Works. The applicants obtained preliminary approval from Hennepin County for the location of their septic system on lot 1, and there's no changes proposed for lot 2. A no wetland determination for proposed lot 1 was approved in November. The wetland determination did not include proposed lot 2, so a condition of approval for the preliminary plat requires the applicants to obtain either a wetland waiver or complete a wetland delineation for proposed lot 2 prior to the final plat. No significant trees are planned to be removed according to the plan submitted. And the plat shows 2 new drainage and utility easements, one along all property lines for proposed lot 1. There is an existing easement on lot 2 along the north and west property lines. So they're just proposing to add additional easements on the southern and east property lines. The applicants submitted preliminary house plans, which satisfied all of our minimum standards. Additional review will occur with the submittal of a building permit, and this is just the front elevation that they provided. And at this time, the Planning Commission should open the public hearing and take comments. And staff recommends the commission to move to recommend approval of the draft resolution approving the preliminary plat for Magnan Acres. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie.
Oh, I do apologize. I forgot to mention, we did receive an email earlier this afternoon with one public comment from Sandra Item, and that was emailed to you, and it's also on the dais. And that should be considered as it was being said at the public hearing.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, at this point in time, we will open the public hearing. Are you here for this public hearing?
We are, yes, yeah.
Okay, so if you would like to speak,
I guess, I mean, that pretty much covered everything we were curious about. Yeah.
okay. All right, we don't have anybody in the audience. So those of you that are online, Natalie will once again give you instructions.
Members of the public online, if you'd like to make a comment on the preliminary plat for Magnan Acres, please raise your hand using the raise your hand function under either the reactions tab or the participants tab. And Chair, I'll mention that the applicants are online as well.
Thank you.
I do not see any hands raised at this time.
I have to give them a little bit of time because remember, last time I was online and tried to raise my hand, I couldn't find the raise your hand button, and apparently I don't have one.
Oh, that's not good.
Well, I was sending you emails.
You were sending me email
or
or was it
Jessica.
Jess? Yeah.
I was sending Jessica emails going, how do I raise my hand?
Do anything.
And she saw the email and then, you know, but it was like, I didn't have that little raise your hand button.
A couple tech guys.
All right, last call for anybody online to address the open hearing. Nobody?
No one online.
Okay. At this point, then I'll take a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
All right. Jay, you want to second
I'll
it?
second that.
All right. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The public hearing is now closed. Thank you. Okay, commission discussion and recommendation. Does anybody, I thought maybe the three of us would go first, and would you like to start off then?
I'd be happy to. sir.
Okay, Commissioner Lanterman.
Natalie, could you pull the map back up? I just have a couple of questions. Yeah, thank you. Go to the next one, I guess. Yeah, that one. So, so the top big chunk, is that lot 1 or 2?
Proposed lot 1, yes.
Proposed lot 1. Okay. And then where would the home be put? Is that on 1 or 2?
So proposed lot 1 would have a home. It's in that northeast quadrant, if you see where Kendra's mouse is.
Yep.
Proposed lot 2, there's an existing home on one of the lots that's going to be consolidated basically into proposed lot 2. And that home is on the southern half of that parcel.
And there was an outbuilding, right? That's kind of in the
Correct.
back
There's a
part.
house
Up top. I'm sorry.
yeah,
Look
on
at
the
that.
northeast quadrant, and it's not even fully in the rear yard setback because it's placed diagonally. So it's just one point that's about 11 feet from the rear property line, but it's legally non-conforming. So staff isn't recommending that we make any changes.
So with the current development rights, which lot currently has the development rights?
So the northern half of proposed lot 2 is where
Okay.
it's currently located. The address is 9257 Trailhead.
Okay, so, and Natalie, I'm going to beg you for your patience with me because I do have a few questions, and thank you for clearing that up. So I understand the mechanics of how development rights transfer, by contract. But I don't understand where the following statement comes from. Natalie, in your report, it states, quote, "The city of Corcoran only allows for the movement of a development right within a plat that includes an adjoining property that has an available development right." So basically, it seems like the way that reads is it seems like the right can move only when it's moving immediately next to where it's currently.
Correct.
I don't see that restriction in our city's code. Can you point that to me? Or
So
point me in that direction?
basically it has to be part of the same plat. And so if it's not an adjoining property, I can try to find it in the code. Do you know where it is in the code off the top of your head?
Well, the exact language isn't in there, but it says you have to have a development right in order to build on the lot. So the exact language used in the staff report, you won't find in the code, but what it says is you have to have a development right in order to develop the property. And there's nothing in the code that allows a transfer of development rights, which is something you might see in other cities where you could transfer from the east side of the city to the west. And so because it's silent, it's not permitted because it's not specifically allowed. It's prohibited to transfer development rights. Therefore, what that means is really I have 5 development rights on this property, 5 developments on that property. I can combine those 2 properties like merging 2 bank accounts is how I kind of describe it when you get married, and then assign them however I want on those parcels. But I couldn't sell my development rights to somebody on the other side of town because it's not specifically permitted.
Okay, but somewhere in the code, it says that the properties have to be adjoining. For
It does
this?
not. It simply
Okay.
says the property needs to have a development right in order to create a lot.
Okay, all right,
That language is.
all right.
It just says you have to.
Great.
Okay, and second, I did find a code section that says that the rural residential district, and I'm quoting here, landowners shall be permitted 1 development right for each 10 acres of land. And I'm referring to section 1040.030 sub 7. Because the 2 properties with the development right to transfer, because in this case, since the 2 properties with the development right to transfer, since when they're combined, they're less than 10 acres. How do they have a development right to transfer in the first place?
So I would need to pull up that plat. I think that plat is actually predates our development rights program, but a lot of record is assumed to have a development right. So you could have 10 development rights on 100 acres. You could choose to only develop that to our minimum lot size of 2 acres. Based on our current code, that'd be allowed. So then you could theoretically end up with one remaining parcel that has a single development right, and then you'd have smaller lots that have development right, even though they're less than 10 acres. If that makes sense. It's basically, it's a way to control density in the rural residential district. So trying to figure out the best way to explain this, that the 10-acre rule is based on the original parcel, and it can be split down further. And it doesn't mean that there wouldn't be a development right for a lot that's under 10 acres.
Yeah, that's not what the code says.
That's how the development rights get assigned.
Well, the
Yeah.
code says that there's one development right per 10 acres of land. Okay, that's what our code 1040-030 sub 7 says. And because these two properties, the two smaller pieces, when they're combined, it's smaller than 10 acres. So I don't understand, how is there even a development right there to transfer from one to the other?
Because again, it comes down to the original parcel. That's how the development rates would have been assigned. And you can have, the minimum lot size in the rural residential is 2 acres. And these parcels predate some of our code because they were created at a time where it could even be less than 2 acres.
Okay, I get that, but if the code currently reads the way it does, wouldn't that preclude us from approving this?
No, because there's still a development right on this property.
Right, and my guess is how? If it's less, when these two parcels are combined, it's smaller than 10 acres. Our code states one building right per 10 acres. So if we're combining these two parcels and together it's less than 10 acres, I'm wondering, how does either of these pieces of property have a building right?
Because the building rights, I don't know if I could take a stab at it, but the building rights are separate from the minimum lot size required for building. So if the original parcel was 100 acres,
Okay.
for saying, then they could have built all those houses or buildings within, I think it was 5 acres before the 80s was what they needed to build. And then we came up with a mound. So now it's at 2 something. But if they had densely utilized all of those building rights in one area, then they had a large outlot left that there, may or may not have development rights affiliated with it. And then now if they are selling, which I believe has already happened, that outlot, right, then the smaller piece left over originally owned by the other individual is less than 10 acres, but held a development right. Am I on the right track?
I think you are.
But I'm not explaining it any better.
I think
It's-
Well,
I'm saying-
my neighborhood was very much that way. It was 60 acres is raw land. So the density is 1 house per 10 acres. So that lot was given 6 building rights. Now the developer can take that, and he did. And he basically created 6 lots, but he couldn't build on any lot that was subdivided out of that less than 2 acres. So when he platted it, he platted 6 lots. And each one of those lots got a building right. The remaining acreage was put into an outlot, and there's no building rights left
That's probably
on
what
it.
happened here.
Yeah, so here, this was platted according to 1 house per 10 acres. But for some reason, that one lot was assigned a building right when it was originally platted, but it was just never used.
Could I,
Now he's gonna transfer it to the adjacent
Or
owner.
they're gonna replat it, which is different than transferring it.
Right, they have to
Legally.
plat it, correct, yeah.
could I ask a follow-up?
Sure, and I'll also add that the code has a development rights map that allows us to maintain what is left on any given parcel. So I think that that's also something.
Yeah, that was my follow-up question. Has the development rights map been pulled? And do we know?
It's
that-
not on there. I did look at
If
it.
it's a lot of record, it no longer shows as a development right on there because you can no longer subdivide that lot. But it's a lot of record. It was intended to be built. And so what they could theoretically do, and we're basically skipping a step, is the Magnans could have purchased the 9257, done a lot line adjustment and basically consolidated their lot with that lot. But the reality is they have no interest in that land, and the property owner that has the two Trailhaven lots would like that land. So we're skipping a second step of moving the lot lines back.
Okay, so I guess what I'm getting hung up on is, okay, so the two parcels put together are less than 10 acres, but then the argument against that is, well, what if, 50 years ago, it was part of, it was that way. But if the development rights map has no recording of this development right on that piece of property, how can we approve this?
It's a lot of record. And so that's what tells us that it.
But that's not
If
what
it
the
was-
code says.
Well, it basically an outlot is unbuildable, and the outlot that's unbuildable is recorded as an outlot. Trailhaven, the 9257 of Trailhaven is an existing lot of record. I think it's lot 1 of Westwood Gardens. So
Hmm.
that's what tells me as a planner that was a lot created to be built on.
Yeah, they could build on it right now. They
Exactly.
could build it, sell it, and so therefore we'd have two smaller lots. Instead, we'll have one slightly bigger.
Well, but yeah, we'll have
Well, the
actually a
3 acre
legal
lot.
conforming lot.
Yeah.
With the 3 acre,
And then
And
a
then
10 acre plus one.
yeah,
acre,
for
which
a new
aligns
single
with-
family home, exactly.
I don't know.
Well, let me see if I understand your question, Commissioner Landerman. So you're questioning, there's the 10 acre, the large parcel. It has no building rights.
Right, per our code.
How is it possible to transfer a building right to?
That doesn't exist on the map.
Yeah,
We have.
How can you transfer something that's not recorded anywhere and per code cannot exist?
We have several lots throughout the city that have not been built upon yet that are recorded the same way on our development rights map. Basically, the development rights in the area have been exhausted for subdivision. And so it no longer shows up on the development rights map. But it's just because it's been exhausted. They can't do any more subdivisions on those parcels. And
Right.
that's what that's showing us. But that doesn't mean that they can't build on that lot.
According to code, it means they can't build on that lot.
I don't believe that interpretation is correct. No, just because how a lot that was created with a single family home in mind, it does, the
In
building
whose
right
mind?
doesn't go away just, and that's why that was subdivided. That's why the plat was created. A lot is created for the preliminary plat at one time created
Right.
10 lots,
Right,
and all those lots were created with the mind of putting a home on it.
right.
And then the reality is anything, at one point, we allowed outlots to be
Mhm.
built without a development right. We no longer allow that unless there's certain circumstances such as an open space and preservation plat that we do, but generally speaking, we don't allow that as part of our development rights program. At
Okay,
one
but
point
I
we
think
did.
that's exactly what's happening here.
Well, this,
I mean, you're saying
Outlot
outlots can't be developed, but yet that's exactly what we're doing.
well, an outlot can't be.
Mr.
developed-
Chair?
Oh.
I'm sorry, this is Counselor Nichols. May I have the floor for just a minute? I think I might be able to clarify.
Sure.
So if I'm understanding the question and the response, it sounds like what I've heard Natalie say is the development rights map only shows excess rights beyond what is built on the lot. So if you've got a lot that hasn't been built on, but is considered buildable, it wouldn't show an excess right. And I think what I'm hearing is when she's saying it's a lot of record, that's what that entails. So it doesn't show a 1 on the map, but the right to build is inherent in the lot because of its classification. Is that correct? Is this just basically how the map is constructed and where the numbers come from?
Well, Counselor Nichols, when I looked at the development rights map, I thought, well, that's maybe just an error. I mean, if we're going to have complete transparency about where a development right exists, where a house could be built legally, that little lot should have had a 1 in it. I think that would be the correct way to do it, so that somebody could, because it's been mentioned here in the letter from the neighbor that they were told that this couldn't be built upon and whatnot, but how would you know that there was a building right available adjacent to the vacant lot, the outlot? If you looked at the development rights map, you didn't see a 1 there, so you would assume that there was no development rights adjacent to it to begin with. That makes sense?
Yeah, I see your point. I think you're right. In a perfect world, you would see if there's a lot that doesn't have a principal structure on it, it would be nice if the map would show that that could be built on.
But well, with all due respect, we have to follow the code. Our code says this cannot be approved, in my opinion. Mr. Chair, I would suggest that we get an opinion from the city attorney on this. Otherwise, I have to vote to deny. Thank you.
Any?
As far as an opinion from the city attorney, this has been something that we've discussed in length with the city attorney throughout just how we've administered this program throughout the years. I understand that this lot, they could come in tomorrow with a building permit for this lot and we would have to issue it. It is a buildable lot.
And I think everybody understands that.
Yeah.
And again, well, did you have any other follow-up questions?
No, sir.
Okay, then with all respect to our other commissioners, I'll continue because there were a lot of clarifications I wanted to get on the topic. When 2 parties discuss the transfer of a building right, does it require city approval at all?
They have to do a preliminary plat.
I'm just talking,
There's no transfer.
Well, there's a sale.
There's no transfer of a development right. That does not exist. And we got to be careful about the language we use,
okay,
because transfer of development rights is a legal tool in some communities, but not here.
okay, then what are we
Can't
doing
plat
here?
Property with development rights. So if I own 2 parcels, which is every development we do, if I have 1 or more parcels, I can choose to combine those parcels through the plat and then apply those development rights that are on those existing parcels however I want in my plat, as long as it complies with the minimum lot size.
Oh, we actually
Okay, but
saw
if
that.
you took 3 lots to transfer building rights, but it was required, that you replat it, you're not going to have 3 lots at the end anyway.
I don't follow.
Well,
I have 3 lots of record.
but let me give you an example, because this is, since I read this and saw this, again, I'm looking for ways to maybe maximize a piece of property that I own. I own an outlot that has no building rights. It was left over as part of our development. Now, after I saw this, I started to question. I have there's 2 20-acre parcels right to the south of me. They're the same size. Each one has 2 development rights, but they're both landlocked. And so they're just like me. They're outside the MUSA. They are not going to get sewer and water, and there's no way to develop those building rights until sewer and water comes, or unless somebody wants to build a road into there, which wouldn't make any sense at all. So I start thinking to myself, well, what if I went to my neighbor and acquired? Okay, that's the safest word I can say. If I acquired a building right from him and transferred it to my property, then at least my 15 acres would have 1 building right.
Correct. You and I spoke about that exact option on the phone.
That's
That
a
is
long time.
absolutely correct. And it's exactly what Karenimi Acres did last year.
Okay, but in doing so, though, I would not have to replat.
You would have to replat your property with his.
Okay, but I wouldn't have to, he wouldn't
Never
have, to.
move
He
the
would
lot
have,
lines.
he would not have to give up ownership of land because this right now does not give up ownership of land.
Mhm.
So it would be, well, I'm going to create Lazy J Acres, lot 1
Mhm.
and lot 2.
Mhm.
Okay, but he can still own that lot and I own mine. There's no replatting of anything.
It would be replatted. Your
I mean, not
outlet-
replat, but no
the lot
change
lines
in,
would
no
be
lot
changed,
lines.
But your outlot would now be lot 1 with 1 development right, and his 20 acres would be lot 2 with 1 development right.
Okay, now that is something that can be done between two parties without approval from the city.
No, it has to be
The
platted.
preliminary plat would require approval from the city. As far as the private sale between you for the development right, that would be something you would administer privately. That's not something the city administers. But without the preliminary plat and final plat approved, it would be, you wouldn't want to do that until the plat is approved. basically.
Okay, now I think this maybe goes to something that we talked about earlier. So like I said, there's two lots. So what if I wanted to acquire 2 building rights? Now I can't acquire the 2 on the lot immediately to me because we can't create an outlot with 0 building rights.
Correct.
Even though by definition, that's what they are. Right? Isn't that what we just said? An outlot is a piece of land that cannot be developed.
So at one point, our development rights program did allow for outlots to be created that have no development rights. We do still have outlots in the city that do have development rights, but you can't build on an outlot. You have to plat an outlot in order to be
Okay,
able
all
to
right,
build it.
fair enough. So I can't acquire the 2 building rights unless I replat it and take ownership of the land. Or can I acquire the 2 building rights and replat it, but that 20 acres now becomes outlot? Okay, I can't. So the only way to get 2 building rights is I'd have to get one from the other parcel. Now, can I take those, or does it have to be transferred like checkerboard?
So I think if you want to talk about your outlot, we
Okay.
need to do that offline because it's more complicated than
Okay.
than this. Because you still have to provide access, you still have to meet the lot frontage requirements. There's a lot more complicated, but if you want to talk about that, we'd certainly be able to.
Okay,
talk about that.
all right.
It's possible, though, there's a path forward, Dean, we can talk about your.
Well, but I mean, it's the idea that building rights can transfer between parcels, that mechanism by which how they're done is something, and here's the comment I wanted to make about it. So in this thing, apparently these people, the neighbors were told that there were no building rights on that lot and it would never be developed. And I'm just kind of wondering, is that standard protocol for how we respond to this, or?
Mr. Chair, if someone called me about your outlot, I would say that parcel is an outlot with no development rights and is not buildable. And I believe that's probably about what everyone who asked about this outlot was told.
They were told the same thing.
Exactly. And that is accurate.
That's accurate.
The Magnans got very creative and they looked around and said, which parcels touch this outlot that I've purchased?
Mhm.
And how can I make this happen? Just like Nate Karanimi did on Karanimi Acres. He bought a lot that was platted by a developer and he had a lot that was next door that had development rights. He platted them together and reassigned the development rights.
Can a rural lot, let's say it's 20 acres, so 10-acre minimum, it gets 2 building rights. If somebody were to transfer rights, could it get 3?
If you bought another 10-acre parcel next to your 20-acre parcel, your 20-acre parcel in that case had 2 building rights and the 10-acre parcel had 1 development right, you would have 3 development rights and you can plat those 3 lots however you want.
Okay.
I mentioned that Bechtold Farms, that was another situation where there were development rights between the two parcels, but they consolidated most of those development rights on the northern parcel and just one on, if you, if there were one or two on that southern parcel. So there's they had 12 development rights between the two parcels,
Yeah,
but they put 11 of those on the northern parcel, even though I believe it was 4 that were available on the southern parcel on the development rights map. So
yeah,
it's not unusual for a plat to come in with adjoining lots that have development rights and to split it up however it makes sense, especially considering we have constraints such as wetlands where it didn't make sense to put 4 development rights on that parcel. It made more sense to put them on the northern part.
okay. In the staff report, it was, or in your slide deck, it said lot 2 was non-conforming. I didn't find that in the staff report.
Lot 2, so basically 9247 Trail Haven, as it stands today, is a non-conforming lot.
Because
Legally non-conforming because it's 1.7 acres and we have a minimum lot size of 2 acres in the rural residential. And same with 9257, it's about, again, about
1.74.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
1.74.
I just wanted to
Yes.
confirm what the
Right,
because again, it just all of a sudden popped up, there was a non-conformance, and
fair enough.
I started looking through it and I'm like, why is it non-conforming? And I figured it was either the frontage or it was the size or both.
The lot size, and I believe the frontage, I think the frontage is pretty close, if not maybe a little under the standards, but the new lot that would be created is conforming in with all of our standards for the district, our existing standards. So it actually creates less of a nonconformity by going through the plating process.
Okay. Wetland delineation on page 4. You've included a condition for approval for wetland delineation. Without getting into the mechanics of who, I believe everything here is a responsibility of the applicant. But this is then a wetland delineation on property that they don't own. Is there any issue with, you're talking about a wetland delineation that is going to be required on a on a parcel
Mhm.
that's only, I mean,
Mr. Chair, it's a wetland waiver, which is something that the city council.
it can be granted, but
Can be granted, or wetland delineation. And the wetland waiver, they have already submitted an application for that. It's actually set to go to city council on the 9th for review. And the owners, the Aussies, they signed off on it. They authorized that application. So it's probably going to be the fact that they're going to have to coordinate that with the Aussies as the applicant. So and they'll probably, if there's any additional fees, they will have.
what is triggering this? Because it's being replatted?
Yes. It'd be
Okay,
required.
I just kind of thought,
Yeah.
hey, listen, they're given a right, but they're
Yeah.
not doing anything to their property.
Exactly.
But
And that's why
yet,
we're
they
suggesting-
could end up with a bunch of, delineation markers all over their yard, if there is. Now, I know the Aussies. I've known them the
Yeah.
whole time I've lived here.
Mhm.
And I went over there and I was like, I didn't see any wetland, but not to say that they're not there.
Correct.
I just,
And it's just a potential wetland that's showing, and they don't have any structures by it. Again, they're not proposing any changes. So actually staff and public works, and I know public or engineering usually doesn't like the waiver process, but everyone's on board that this is a perfect example of our wire wetland waiver process of this. So
okay. On page 5, under the house plans, we talk about section 1030.03. The house must have a permanent foundation and have a minimum floor area of 1,100 square feet. I know that I always keep bringing this up. I don't like the way we describe square footage in terms of buildings. It just says minimum floor area of 1,100. So are we talking gross building area? Or are we talking footprint?
footprint, I would talk about minimum floor area. I would say that could be split up over multiple levels, whereas a footprint, that's just looking at how much space it takes on the actual ground. But minimum floor area, technically that could be split over a couple different levels. But
Okay, so you could have basically a tiny house with 2 floors.
Yes. Yeah.
that would meet the
As long
is
as
that
it
really
meets
what
the
is that really
minimum
what is that really what our ordinance? I mean, that's a broad question. It's,
I mean, footprint, we say footprint elsewhere in our ordinance, and that's like with our accessory structures, we have a maximum allowable accumulated footprint. And so if we were saying that the house needed to have a minimum footprint of 1,100 square feet, that's what we would be saying. But floor area, we're talking about the floor area
Okay.
available in the house.
again, I know that my comrade, Commissioner Lanterman brings a legal perspective to this. I bring a real estate perspective to this, and I don't like the way this is ever worded. When you say minimum floor area, I think, well, then I'm looking at the plans going, does it have 1,100 square feet on one level? Or can we build a tiny house with 2 floors to meet the, and I would think that it would be first level, ground level, at 1,100 square feet. So this really should say must have a minimum gross building area of 1,100 square feet. That's just my own 2 thoughts. All right. In the summary, staff finds that the proposed preliminary plat is generally consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. That raises a question. When we say that it is generally consistent, as I went through this, it looks like it meets pretty much all of them. Is generally just the way we,
That may have just been a stylistic error. I apologize. I believe it is consistent with our standards. Yes.
okay. Because I was like, well, how does it not? I mean, what is not generally consistent?
No, fair enough. It's a typo. It is consistent with the ordinances we have in place and with similar projects that we have approved.
Okay, I wanted to ask a couple of things about the letter then that we received today. And we won't talk about the development rights. I don't know who informed them. I don't know what their belief was, but the engineering report. So when we get to the second paragraph, item 1 down there, their concerns, snow removal. There's nothing in their plat or what they're doing that says that they have to move the driveway.
Technically, the driveway is something that is reviewed as part of a driveway permit. We did have them include the location so that we could kind of call out any errors or any red flags that we would see by what they were proposing. Public Works did review the proposed location, and they actually agree that it is in the best possible location. They want to keep it away from 93rd because they know there's anticipated intersection improvements. And so they don't want the driveway too far south. And if the current location, it actually provides for the best visibility lines.
I agree 100% with that.
Okay.
No, I do. I mean,
Okay.
like I said, I was up there and I was like, I wouldn't put it at the bottom. I think the engineer report said it's the best place for it.
Yeah.
Okay. And then item 2, well, the safety concern. Let's move on. The last paragraph, we are concerned about the beautiful existing trees that are being cut down on the property line. Now, the road, the private drive does have, it does have a row of trees, but I don't see that being on this, on the subject parcel here. I mean,
The trees actually belong to the outlot that is a part of that, whoever owns that private drive. It isn't a part of the lot that's being proposed for replat.
that's what I'm saying. It belongs to the development on the other side of the road.
And to my understanding, I know that there was concern about trees being cut down, but I think that we're being concerned about beautiful existing trees that are being cut down on the property line. So I guess I don't know if they're saying that trees have already been cut down or if they're concerned about them being cut down, by the way this is read. I spoke with the applicants and their surveyor about marking significant trees, the intent was to not take any trees other than what's necessary to put up their driveway, which would be trees on their property. So I guess I would need to follow up with the items.
I mean, the only tree cutting was actually the house across the street, the first one on the corner. Behind them, there's wooded areas.
Mhm.
And there is some tree clearing going on there.
Yeah, so
Currently.
I guess I don't know exactly.
I don't know if
where-
there's a mix up of,
Right.
you know, who's cutting what trees, but
Agreed.
I didn't see any either, but if it's not an issue, okay, that's all.
The Magnans are raising their hands, so they maybe could even speak to that if you'd like to hear from them.
If they want to if they want to chime in, they can raise the hand.
Brandon and Chelsea, I'm going to unmute you now if you'd like to speak. Oops. Oops.
All
Go
right,
ahead.
you can hear us now?
Yep.
All right, so yeah, I agree with your assessment there. There aren't any trees that are going to be getting cut down. The trees that line the private drive are there. There's a row of flowering lilacs between our property and Trail Haven, and we moved one of those trees. We transplanted it down the hill a little bit to give us our driveway cut through there. But again, there's not any trees that are going to be cut down through this process on that side at all.
Okay, and the pine trees up towards the road,
Yep,
are those on your lot or are they on the other development?
those are on the other development. Sandra just planted one of those big pine trees shortly after we purchased the property too. And so that whole row of trees there is hers.
Okay,
One
So-
thing I would like to add too, back to the development right map question. So it does say on the development right map that even though some properties show a 0, that there may be one development right remaining. And it instructs the person to go and contact planning. And so some of the confusion on there where you may see properties with no rights, the map instructs the person to actually contact because there may in fact be a right remaining.
okay,
We
great.
have to look at plats to confirm. So we go off the plats and make the determination from there.
Has that been done?
Yes.
It's been done. We have a building right or a development right on that piece of property.
We have a plat, Westwood Gardens addition, that shows this as a lot of record that would be buildable today by itself, yes.
With a development right assigned to it.
The plats don't show the development rights assigned. It's just the way that it was recorded, it was a lot of record, which means you can build on it. If it was unbuildable, it would be an outlaw.
Okay, how do we keep track of development rights? Is that on the map?
That is how we keep track of it now. We basically do the best we can because we were given a handwritten map. I believe in 2004, it was digitized. But yes, when we get a plat and the development rights have been exhausted, then we update our development rights map accordingly.
Okay, so, but as it stands now, though, the development rights map shows there are no development rights for this piece of property, correct?
For the outlot, correct, has no development rights. The 9257 and 9247 both show us no development rights, but 9247 has a house and it is a lot, just as 9257 is a lot. And they could have built a house, but the Aussies chose to buy that land so that no one would build a house right there. 'cause they
Okay,
don't have that space.
I get that, but the development rights map shows that this piece of property has no development rights available, correct?
The development right shows that this entire Westwood Gardens addition doesn't have a development right because it's
Okay.
all been used.
That's all I needed
Yeah.
to hear. Thanks.
Is the concern of setting, is the concern that you have regarding the language and the map? Is it that it would set a precedent for future, or I guess, because I understand the concern, I'm wondering just what, because we're also dealing with trying to bring things into like from a former way of doing things into a new way of developmental rights, is my understanding. And so taking these handwritten maps and then digitizing them. So we've got this mesh of information that we're making work. And so I guess I'm just wondering, moving forward, there shouldn't be these types of issues coming up. So is the concern just that there are things left out there and it would set a precedence if this was approved?
No, my concern is that if we approve this, it's not in conformity with our city code. That's my concern.
Okay, even though the city attorney feels like,
I don't know, the city attorney is not here. I've not heard
Okay.
from the city attorney. And I was just told the development rights map shows there are no development rights for this piece of property. And I don't believe that we should just rub a lamp and make one miracle. You know, you have to follow the rules.
Well,
And if we don't like the rules, we should change the rules.
so going back to a recent plat that we've approved in this area under the development rights, Bechtold Farms. If someone were to, those are all going to show up as lots of records. And the development rights will be updated so that they don't see, there's not going to be a 1, it's just going to be a 0. But someone could theoretically buy a 5-acre parcel and then something adjacent, similar to what the Aussies have done, that does, and
And
they
not
don't-
build.
and not build, because they just want that area for themselves. That doesn't make that lot unbuildable all of a sudden. It's just, they haven't exhausted the development rate or the ability to build on that parcel.
but the evidence that it has a development right is the fact that it's platted.
It's platted lot of record, yes.
Yeah, well-
And otherwise, it would be listed as an outlot. It would either be an outlot with development rights, or it'd be like what we are seeing here, an outlot with no development rights. Because at one point we allowed that to be created. Obviously, we realized the confusion with that and we changed gears, but we are working with what was created back, I think. Westwood Gardens was built or platted in the 70s, and then Outcult additions were platted throughout the 90s and early 2000s.
So if I'm understanding correctly, the very evidence that it has a development right is on this map, this existing condition survey showing this lot 1 of West Gardens. That in and of itself shows that it has a development right,
That it can be built upon, yes. Yeah, it can't,
that it can be built upon.
yes,
Okay.
it's a buildable lot. If it was unbuildable, it'd be an outlot.
It seems,
Okay.
and I'm new to this, but just what I'm hearing is that today on this extra lot that the Aussies have, that they want to give them development, they could build a house. You're maybe suggesting they shouldn't be allowed even to build a house in what we think you're saying they could build a house today on a 1.74 acre lot. I think you're saying, hey, they shouldn't even be allowed to build there because there's no development right on the map and it's non-conforming. Is that true?
Well, what I'm saying is that our code, section 1040.030, and I'm quoting here, reads, landowner shall be permitted 1 development right for each 10 acres of land. That piece of property is not 10 acres. Okay, that's fine. But then I get hung up on the fact that there are no development rights recorded on the development rights map. So now it's just it just seems to me as though, we're just approving things just because we want to, when we have rules that we should be following. And if we don't like our code, if we don't like the restrictions, then we should change them. But we should follow our code. And because of that, I'm going to vote to deny.
So the density requirements you're discussing in the city code. Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I can say is that we're talking about the initial total area of land, and that's how the development rights were originally assigned when the development rights programs were started. And it's explaining that process. And
But
then
the code doesn't
development
say
rights
that
map.
though. We're speculating. I don't believe the code says that. If it does, can you point me to that?
The section identifies the maximum number of residential units that may, or non-residential units that may be developed. The development rights program is intended to preserve a rural residential environment with active agribusinesses. So the development shall be calculated based on the total lot area and rounded to the nearest whole number. And this was done in the 1980s. And we've since had a development right map that we have updated through time, showing how the development rates have been exhausted.
Right. And we keep track of that on the map, right?
Yes.
And the map is showing no development rights for this property, correct?
It would show any platted lot as any platted lot in the city would show it's no development right. But it's because there's no longer any subdivision rights. It doesn't make it unbuildable. What makes it buildable is the fact that it is a platted lot of record.
you could probably update so potentially you're saying if you took the time, you could go through the plotted lots, find out which one, and then update the development rights map with all of the potential plotted lots that haven't built on. I mean, how do you determine
And
if it
I
is
think
buildable?
part of the issue too is like, we wouldn't want to show as one on the development rights map, because then all of a sudden someone could try to come in with a OS&P and try to double those rights with like technically two, because our OS&P process, an open space and preservation plat, you get a density bonus. So we don't want it to show as one when we've already been subdivided down, when all of the development rights have been exhausted. But every platted lot that has a single family home in a rural residential area is a buildable lot. And the development rights map shows nothing for a development right, but it doesn't mean it's unbuildable. If it's a platted lot of record, it is buildable.
So you're saying potentially the Magnans
Maintenance, yeah.
could buy, in theory, I think you mentioned before, they could buy this 9257, even though it doesn't show a development right, they could then technically build, potentially break off that 1.75 acres, sell it back to the people that have it to a 3 acre lot, and that's what you're saying, we're skipping that. Would that fit to would that be allowed?
Well, and that's what they actually proposed to me first, is what they wanted to do was do a lot consolidation so they could get that lot.
Oh,
But then they told me, but then they're gonna sell the land back, and then they would do another lot line adjustment so they could have their property back.
but you would probably still say it still doesn't show a buildable right, therefore, regardless that even then it is 10 acres. It's
Right.
still technically, from your
If we
saying,
use that logic though, every lot in the rural residential area that's part of the
wouldn't be
plat
buildable.
wouldn't be buildable.
Right, but if that's the case, then maybe we should consider rewriting the code.
Well, I
Mr.
can-
Chair,
Yes,
sorry to interject yet again. I do apologize, but I've been doing a little bit of digging through my notes, and I did find, to Brendan's point earlier, on the development rights map, there actually is a footnote, and I'll read it for your convenience here. There's an asterisk at the bottom of the map and says, existing vacant lots of record which show no building rights may have one building right remaining. Please confer with the city planner to confirm the actual number of building rights. And so it kind of closes the loop for me. I certainly see Commissioner Lanterman's point in reading the code. It does refer to the map as the official record, but the map itself defers in these particular cases that if there are lots of record, there could be a building right, and it is not intending to display all of those. So I feel like maybe there's room to improve the clarity of the code, but I don't think that this would be violating to approve.
Commissioner, I guess what I would say is then where is the planner going to for documentation of, to determine whether or not a development right or a building right exists? If it shows 0 on the map and it says, well, just go check with the planner, what is the planner referring to? Or is this just at the discretion of the city planner?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Landerman, I'm looking at the plats. I'm looking at the plats of record, and lots on a plat are buildable. An outlot is not buildable. That's how I can tell the difference.
and I understand.
Okay.
I, I do understand. It's just, once it's platted,
Mhm.
the plat has outlots and lots.
Mhm.
If it has a lot, it's inherently got a building right.
Exactly,
And that is not therefore displayed necessarily on the building rights map.
exactly.
It's not stated,
That is it.
it's just inherently, so I get that.
Oh, and if there's no house on the lot, then there must be a right now.
I mean,
Right, there
you
was-
can go down
yeah.
Fox Line Drive. I know of people that own 2 lots, just like the Aussies do.
I know, I actually just had a call yesterday, another lot in a different part of town, but still rural residential, where there is a vacant lot of record that hasn't ever been built on, but the property owner who originally bought it because he wanted that extra space is now selling it. And it is a build, they would be able to come in tomorrow with a building permit and be able to build on that lot, yes.
I get it. Okay. All right. Commissioner Scholak,
Okay,
you got the floor.
thank you, sir. Most of my points have been already discussed. I just wanted to mention from the email from the email of Sandra Hyden, her last paragraph concerning the existing trees that are being cut down on the property sounds like it's happening now. It's in present tense. And she finishes it by saying there will be no more trees removed. So that to me sounds like there is something going on there. And I think we also need to clarify, not at this meeting, but on page 4 under landscaping, the applicant's plan indicates that no significant trees will be removed. And I don't know what significant means.
Our code has, it's a certain caliber. They are not proposing, as the applicant spoke before, they're not proposing to remove any tree that doesn't need to be removed. And I have to mention that our code does not have any kind of tree preservation ordinance, as we know.
Right.
So they are allowed to remove trees that are on their property. If they need to, they definitely can, or if they want to, but they aren't, that's not their intent from speaking with them. They like the lot for the natural features that it has. So they're not planning on removing anything that doesn't need to be removed.
Okay. And so the term significant tree, is that their definition or the city's definition?
That was the city's definition. That was the response I got when looking at the survey, asking for them to clarify if there were any significant trees on the property, and they made it clear that they had no intention of removing anything over the certain size. I think that we have an actual definition. Kendra's looking it up right now.
Caliper inches of 8 inches or more.
Caliper of 8 inches or more is considered a significant tree per our city code.
Okay. That's it for me, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Commissioner Drummond.
Everything that I was going to discuss has been discussed. I just would say too that I've driven up and down that road, and I think the driveway placement, it's in lieu of them being allowed access from the private drive, which is a private matter. In lieu of that, then I think the next best solution, it really is the peak at the top of the hill. The mailboxes are already there, so any stopping for the postmaster, garbage man, everything can all happen in that consolidated location rather than adding another location farther down that road. So I think, and I hear the disappointment from the neighbor. So I want that to be acknowledged, but I do really feel like public safety and, clear sight lines, that really is the best place.
Agree. Okay, thank you. All right, Commissioner Van Den Eide.
Nothing for me. Great dialogue already on all the things I was curious about. So it's good.
Okay.
Plus, I mean, I had gotten an overview and I met before. So
Okay, great. All right, have we had a chance to review the resolution? During our discussion, there's been no talk of changing anything. But I always like to read through there because sometimes it does bring up something that maybe you missed through the staff report. I didn't note anything.
just from my understanding, is this resolution, it looked like this is what gets given to city council? Is that what happens?
Correct.
Yeah. Mhm.
So
So
this is the language.
we are a body that we just recommend approval,
Mhm.
and we can add changes. We can recommend changes to any of the resolutions that we forward to them or denial.
Okay.
But we don't, yep. And then, of course, the city council, if they see something, they always have the authority to change it on their own without our recommendation or the Parks and Trails recommendation. Okay, well, if there is no changes or further discussion, would somebody like to make a motion to approve the preliminary plat for Magnan Acres?
I'll make that motion. Shulak.
Okay,
And I'll second that motion, Drummond.
all right. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Okay. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. And good luck to the Magnans, the city council. All right, we'll move on to item 7B, public hearing, the zoning amendment for assembly uses. And we will entertain the staff report, please.
The planning commission is being asked to hold a final public hearing and provide a recommendation on the proposed zoning ordinance amendment, adding performance standards for educational facilities and places of worship within urban residential zoning districts. We've had a lot of discussion on this, so I'm just going to summarize the performance standards in front of you tonight for review. We have, as discussed, the sliding setback based on the footprint of the building. I did specifically add in, based on our last conversation, that educational facilities and places of worship are not eligible for setback flexibility through additional landscaping as provided elsewhere in our code. Next slide. We have a maximum building height of 35 feet, maximum impervious surface coverage of 50%. And then we have the landscaping zone with the width based on the applicable setback based on the building footprint. So if it's a 50-foot setback on all property lines, then that 50-foot setback needs to be landscaped. The standard for the landscaping zone, I added language to make that a little clearer while still having room for flexibility in how it's implemented. Which is this red language. The landscaping zone will consist of evergreen or deciduous trees and shrubs with a sufficient density to provide visual buffering to a minimum height of 8 feet, with the grade elevation of the building being used to determine that height. Earth mounding or berms may be used, but cannot exceed more than 3 feet of the required buffer height. And a fence can be installed if the developer applicant so chooses, but it's not in lieu of the planted landscaping zone. These standards also clarify that lighting for parking lots must reflect glare away from adjoining property and public rights of way. Parking must be screened to a height of at least 3 feet to address headlights from vehicles. We also have a requirement for large areas of parking to include internal landscaping islands. Speaking with the city attorney last Wednesday, I did update the language. So the updated wording has 350 square feet of internal landscaping required for parking areas of 3,000 square feet or larger. The previous language, it really didn't kick in until about 6,000 square feet. And I don't think that's really what we intended. And square footage of land devoted to internal landscaping islands increases by 100 square feet for each additional 1,000 square feet of parking space. And that's definitely something that if you guys disagree with that change, feel free to adjust that. Primary site access must be direct access to a major roadway or a major minor collector roadway, no more than 1,000 feet from a major roadway. Exterior bells and loudspeakers are limited to 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. The city retains discretion to attach additional conditions as they see fit. And then we also, based on our last conversation, added the safe harbor clause to our additional requirements, which clarifies the city's ability to exempt religious uses from performance standards determined to substantially burden those uses without needing to formally change our policies. So at this time, we can open the public hearing to take comments, and then staff recommending approval of the draft ordinance amendment and resolutions approving the findings of fact.
Great. Thank you, Natalie. All right, at this point, we will open up the public hearing. We have nobody in the audience here, so if there's anybody online, please raise your hand and Natalie will give you instructions on how to address the planning commission.
Yes, members of the public online, if you're here to speak on the assembly uses item, please use the raise your hand function under the reactions tab, or the participants tab can also sometimes have that. And at this time, I don't see any hands raised, and half of our audience are council members, so.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make that motion.
Second it.
All right, all those in favor, aye, say aye. Aye, opposed? All right, public hearing is now closed. Commission discussion and recommendations. Commissioner Scholak, would you like to start us off, please?
Just one point, maximum building height, and I'm thinking in terms of houses of worship. Does the maximum structure height include any type of steeple or cross or anything?
Commissioner Schulak, actually, those are considered architectural elements that are specifically exempt from the maximum building height, so they would be able to still have spires and bell towers if we're talking about the actual roof pitch of the building.
Whatever the highest point of that roof is. Okay,
Exactly.
thank you. That's it for me, sir.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lanterman.
The only comment I have is about the landscape zone. Section 4 reads, in addition to meeting the landscaping standards of section 1060.070 subdivision 2A of the city code, any portions of the site that abut a residential area will contain a landscaping zone along the shared property line. And then here's the language I'm commenting on, with a minimum width of the applicable setback established in standard 1. So does this mean that the entire shared property line is screened?
Buffered, yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because it's like the way it's written to me, it seems a little unclear. So I appreciate that clarification. So does this mean that the zone will have, like, the zone will be packed with trees in the entire strip between the property line and the building?
To the point where it would be healthy, like obviously if we can't pack in so many trees that the trees can't grow, but it would be, at this point, I was hesitant to add specific numbers because we're already seeing issues where we have these numbers that are so unobtainable for the site that we have to get flexibility granted. And then the idea is not to have constant ask for variances. So there is some discretion, and I'm trying to allow for that flexibility, but the idea is there would be buffering. You're still probably going to see it a bit, but there would be some buffering between the residential properties and the use that you're trying to buffer from.
Yeah, because because when it says with a minimum width, that seems to me like this is like a wall of trees just to meet this requirement. And, I don't have a good imagination to see what this is going to look like.
Fair enough. If we looked, I don't have the examples from some of the sites that we looked at last time, but some of the Wayzata High School, they had significant tree buffering, not on all property lines, but it would have probably far exceeded the 200 feet width in some areas. I'm pretty sure it did. So I don't think it's necessarily, if we're talking about a large building, I think that it's something that would be accommodable on a site that can accommodate such a large building. But the idea is that it would provide some visual buffering, and you want it to span that width along the property line.
Okay.
So.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Not for me.
Okay. Commissioner Brumman?
I just had two things, and not to get hung up on terminology here, but oftentimes in the code, at the beginning of a section, you'll define all of the words. And so impervious is one that is not defined. And the only reason I bring it up is because we're talking about schools. And so my question is just like baseball diamonds, soccer fields, football fields, like play areas like that. Would those be considered impervious, or would those be considered pervious? Because my understanding is just impervious means it's a hard surface that doesn't allow the water to soak into the ground, right? And so arguably a soccer field could be a pervious surface, right?
Correct. Yeah, I could definitely add it.
And not that we, you know, I don't want to be someone who like, but I just, if it's going to create an issue forward and we could clarify now,
Yeah.
because it includes schools, then maybe that would be helpful.
I'll be happy to add that. That's not a problem.
Good call.
And then the only other question I had was related to that addition about not creating the setback, like these two educational facilities and places of worship not being eligible for the flexibility through additional landscaping. And I know you guys did such a phenomenal job. I watched the 2 hours of that council meeting, while, you know, doing a number of other things, but you guys did such a great job talking about, like bringing up a lot of really good discussion points. And even to like the point that you had made, like, it's really hard to discuss something before there's a proposal in front of you. And I think that's true. And so I just wonder, is that really something we want to commit to right now? Would it require a variance down the road then if someone came in with a proposal that we really, really liked and we were like, oh, well, we had made this decision that we were going to be inflexible. I know that the safe harbor clause would seem that we can say, oh, we don't need to apply that with the approval of the council without having to change the code. So even if it's in here, it doesn't seem like it might be a sticking point, but I just wanted to wonder about that.
Well, and Commissioner Brumman, I would add that that's specifically for the religious uses. So if it was a school
Oh,
that
okay.
came in, they do not have that safe harbor clause would not apply to. a
That's just
school.
specifically because of the
Specific for religion.
Okay,
And that's specific wording where I use basically verbatim what is in the federal statute, because that's what it's best practices that I found elsewhere in terms of how we incorporate the safe harbor clause.
okay.
But so as far as that goes, that's specifically for religious uses. So if we want to be flexible and allow for that landscaping or allow for more landscaping to reduce the setback from our county roads, because that's basically where
Yep,
it's
that was the
applied.
only one, yeah.
Right,
Mentioned that.
then I would say we would want to adjust, we would want to work on that now.
Okay.
Rather than
ask for a bunch of variances
Yeah.
down the road.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And so I guess like I remember the comments, if I remember them correctly, that some of the concern with allowing the flexibility was that it's been known that oftentimes that's done just so they can build bigger. But I'm just curious if we in practice, do we do that for developers of residential homes? And then is that really something then that if we do it in practice already that we want to just not do for these two specific kind of buildings?
do we do it for residential? Isn't it mostly commercial that uses that clause?
Well, residential subdivisions have used
Oh,
that as
the
well.
That's what I wondered,
Okay.
is that they want to get closer to that county road to change their lot division. So we have allowed it for people making subdivision neighborhoods.
Yeah, I know it's a very popular clause that does get used when it's beneficial.
Right,
So,
right.
And so I think it's, the issue is, do we want it closer to the street or do we want it further from the street? So.
Okay. I guess personally, I would just appreciate the consistency. So if we don't want things close to the street, then we don't want things close to the street kind of regardless, seems to me, whether it's a residential home or whether it's a school or a place of worship. But I feel like consistency, if we're going to allow flexibility.
And I'll also just clarify, Commissioner Bremen, with the county roads, there's 100-foot setback, whereas a regular road or pretty much any other road that's not a county road has a 50-foot
50,
setback.
yeah.
So, and the 100-foot setback would take precedent even if the building footprint would otherwise allow for a 50-foot setback.
Okay,
The county property line would still have to be set back 100 feet.
sure.
And that's kind of the same thing for other uses, like it's basically trying to reduce it to, I think we can reduce it to 60 feet with landscaping.
For the building,
Yeah,
the parking gets reduced to the other local street setback.
okay.
Okay,
So, yeah, so I think it's still consistent overall with how our city is being developed elsewhere. It's just having some flexibility from the more stringent county road setback.
okay,
But I see your point as well.
okay. That's all.
That's it?
Yeah, I'm not totally settled on like, what do we do about that? But if no one else has anything to chime in, mine was more just like a for discussion. But if that's kind of it, then I will defer to all of the hard work that you guys have already done on this. So,
Well, I don't think there's any way we can make a foolproof ordinance without, that'll handle every single oddity or situation will come in. So you're always going to know that there's going to be some soft spot or some hidden thing that is, and there's variances and things like that that they can apply for. And the city has, I think, more often than not, shown good flexibility to handle these things. But in this thing particularly, I'll bring up an issue when it's my time that, you just gotta sit back and go, all right, is this really gonna work? How are you gonna handle the situation? Mr. Vanden Linde.
I was more just curious about like in the Maple Grove one, they talked about screening for like mechanical rooms and trash containers. We didn't specifically put that in there. Is that something it does kind of just say that the city council may attach additional conditions. Is it kind of just like too much it's too much detail at some point? There's maybe some common sense. I don't know, but then it's not a rule. I don't know either if they come and they're like, no, we want to have the container out here. We don't want to screen it. Can we still put it on it if the proposal comes in front of us?
So as far as screening for garbage cans, and we address that elsewhere in our code. So there are some standards in our code existing. A, B, yes, we can attach additional standards if we have a proposal in front of us and that's not going to work with the neighborhood. We would be within our rights to do that. You're not losing anything by having these standards in place. This is just ideally to make our standards clearer for applicants as much as possible. But yeah, if they're proposing something that we haven't really seen before, we would be able to adapt to it on the fly. Yes.
I mean, I guess in theory, where there would be shrubs or some type of screening around the whole property. So why would I necessarily have to do that with the trash can? But at some point, deciduous trees don't have leaves on them, and it's now winter.
And that's why I put evergreen, but then I know evergreens are having.
And you had
problems
shrubs.
too.
Oh, that was
So,
good. Okay.
And I don't want to just put evergreens just because I know that some of our evergreens are starting to have problems with our warmer climate. So ideally we'll come up with like a evergreen deciduous hybrid,
Yes.
But so I was trying to keep it flexible, but the idea is that there would hopefully be some evergreens that would still provide full coverage in the winter.
Okay. That was just a question. I figured there was some coverage on that.
Yeah, no, thank you. Great questions.
Okay. I got a couple of questions. So on the first page, the analysis under 3, adding more detailed landscaping zone. Allowing flexibility from county road setbacks currently provided to other uses under the city code. All of these items have been factored into the currently proposed zoning. I didn't see the city council meeting. I see here that they opted for option 2, but they agreed here with the.
They had no comments. They basically just said option 2, send it back, let's get this done. So I went with what your guys' recommendation was and figured we would hash it out on December 22nd.
Okay, all right. Okay, and then just to clarify, so on page 2, under 1 setbacks, very last item on the page 2, B. Any property lines fronting a county road shall require a minimum setback of 100 feet for anything under 24,000 square feet. And that's because along county roads, we already have a minimum of 100 feet.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that was just a clarification point.
Yep. Okay. Under 4, landscaping zone. So under B, second sentence, the grade for determining height shall be the grade elevation of the building or use for which the buffering is providing protection.
Mhm.
So it has to be 8 feet. So what I'm envisioning here is you have, this is where your use is.
Mhm.
And then you have your residential neighborhood over here,
Mhm.
but there's a grade elevation change. Right?
Okay.
Could be 4 feet, could be
Mhm.
12 feet,
Mhm.
right? But the 8-foot standard is going to be 8 feet from this point here,
Mhm.
not up here.
Correct. Yeah, that would be true. It's a minimum. It doesn't mean that they get away with no landscaping. They would still have to do landscaping.
Well, I understand,
Yeah.
they still have to do it.
But yeah, if it's lower, then they kind of have it pretty easy. They could probably do more shrubs than trees to be able to satisfy the code in this aspect. They still have the landscaping requirements they have to meet elsewhere. I actually seeing it be more of an issue where the trees at a high point, or not the tree, the church or schools at a high point. Just because low points, you probably don't want to build in a low point too much because you're gonna have flooding issues. So you're probably gonna actually have it more at a higher elevation.
Well, I mean, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to flood. What is it, here again, if your neighborhood is higher than the use,
Mhm.
okay, you could put, we're getting into the weeds on that. I was just trying to understand because it mean that you could plant all of the trees you want at 6 feet.
Mhm.
And it's not gonna, or 8 foot, and it's not gonna do anything to hide it from an elevation high. The only way you can actually properly hide it is you'd have to put the trees closer to the residential neighborhood,
Mhm.
instead of close to the use.
Well, it's supposed to be in the setback. So it is supposed to be closer to
Yeah.
the shared property line.
Unless, again, there's a hill. I just wanted to confirm, where are we marking? I just wanted to understand that's where the 8 feet is going to be measured from.
It's from the use.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would also say, while I'm sure hiding is a goal, it's ultimately the goal that the code is describing as buffering. So we're not saying that there's no chance you're going to see any of the building. We're saying we're going to provide some buffering to minimize the visual and audio impact of the use.
Yeah, because if it was a 20-foot drop from some hill and they're down to a house, they're not gonna have a 30-foot. I mean, they can't even build a fence, or would we expect them to build some giant berm and then try to build,
And we don't want a berm that's more than 3 feet. I just think that gets.
yeah,
So.
I mean, get 30-foot evergreen trees to.
No, I think in that situation, we would just do the best we could. I still think that there would be, I mean, if you're at the high point and there's trees, because that is ideally, it's supposed to be on that setback line. So if there's landscaping and you're at the high point, there would still be some buffering that you're getting. You might still see the spire. But that the goal isn't necessarily to completely hide it so that you never see it. It's just to provide some transition.
Okay, I wanted to ask then further on item 4. When we talk about this buffer zone, landscaping zone. So I'm sorry that I'm drawing this crudely, but I don't know how else to, because I thought about this for another issue, but so here's our residential neighborhood. So you got house, house, and house, right? And let's say this is a wetland or something like that, but there's no houses here. So when we talk about the buffer going along the entire strip of land that's adjacent to the neighborhood, would that strip of land end right here? Or does it have to go over here and they would be burdened with that strip, even though there's no houses in that section, that along that property border? You see what I'm saying here?
If it's an outlet, would
The
it
way
be
it's-
considered residential?
It would be, well, the way you've written it, I think it would,
It would be residential, okay.
you could say, you know, develop residential lots or something different. but-
We could change the wording, but I think, yeah, Kendra agrees that the way I've worded it, they would have to plant along that wetland property line. But we could change the wording so that specifically to developed residential lots, because the wetland would be more of a outlet, that would be an outlot example. Or.
Well, I mean, it's
yeah.
kind of a tough call because what if you have a house here,
Mhm.
right? And the use goes all the way around here. You would still then obviously want to go all the
Yeah.
way around.
So I think that is just one consequence of the code. But yeah, it's a fair question. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if it made no sense, because we saw in the examples you pulled up,
Mhm.
there were homes that
Mhm.
were sitting way over here,
Mhm.
here, and here's the school, but this is a wooded section and nobody's cutting down the woods,
Mhm.
you
Exactly.
know?
Yeah.
So quite honestly, the strip would be somewhat redundant, not really necessary because you've already got a natural barrier.
And that might be something that we could review with a specific.
Or maybe the woods
Yeah.
is on this side.
And then they wouldn't need to do it encourages them to retain that.
Well,
area.
we'd all like to see that, but they'd have that option, right? I mean, it wouldn't be, well, here's the woods and now you still got to put another buffer zone on it.
Oh, no, we would still go by the setback line. So if they already have, if that area by the residential area is already 300 feet wide of landscaping, and it provides a natural buffering as it is, I think that without having a tree preservation ordinance encourages them to not do anything with that because they already have the requirement. They wouldn't need to plant anything in addition to that if they already have a landscaping buffer.
Okay, but when they came in then for a plant, for a plat for that use, would they have to get a variance then to not put it in the buffer zone?
If they already have a
Specifically.
buffer zone, they would just need to show on a survey all those trees so that
Okay.
we can make a determination that they meet that code requirement.
Okay, great.
We want to be clear that it could be existing or new trees.
And we could make it clear in there that existing trees would count towards it. I could add that.
I like it.
All right.
Do you guys like that as well?
Mhm.
Okay. Under item 5. C. Parking area. So I just want to kind of, and I know that I kind of brought this up during our last public hearing. You know, under what we're proposing here, with modifications to a smaller facility, it would have been possible for a large religious facility to be built where Eagle Brook was, okay? And if we recall back then, we were talking about a 75,000 square foot building.
Mhm.
And we were talking about 10 acres of parking. Now, under our proposal here, certainly they would have maxed out on everything,
Oh, yeah.
okay?
And the landscaping for the parking would have definitely cut into.
Well, so that's what I wanted to bring up under C. So, you know, what is it, 43,560 square feet in an acre?
Yes, yeah. I think that's it.
All right, so if you've got 435,600 square feet, because they proposed 10, I'm just going to use 10 acres. Because in the realm of possibility, it's there.
Right.
Okay, so you take off your 3,000, you got 432,600. Divide that by 1,000, you got 4,326. Now multiply that by 100, right?
Oh, yeah, 100 feet of landscaping. Yep. I'm sorry. I was like, where did we get 100?
So you're talking about a lot of landscaped islands.
A lot of landscaping
I
space.
mean, so this policy, I think, works good in normal sized, reasonable expected type of situations.
Mhm.
And kind of to the point that the commissioners made earlier, what option does a church have now under the federal safe harbor?
Mhm.
You know, the church could say, man, we just, that's going to blow our budget to have to put in all these landscaped islands, and they're going to come right back here, and then the city council is going to have to figure out ways. So how do we handle the process of reviewing a parking lot situation where you don't have all these landscaped islands? Is there,
It'd be hard
is
to
that,
call them and-
is that through a variance, or is it through the application process asking for a modification at that point?
I think you'd be able to do either. So if they knew from the get-go that they aren't going to be able to meet that landscaping standard, keep in mind our variances, financial hardship is not the only consideration. They have to prove that something about the lot is unique, that they can't meet this standard. So that'd be one route. The other route would be that safe harbor clause and try to invoke that. If it's a church or a place of worship, they could theoretically invoke that. And then the city could decide from there if they want to waive that requirement.
Well, again, I'm not saying that this would be necessarily a financial hardship, but
Mhm.
If you've got 432 and then times 100, you're going to have 43,000 square feet of landscaped islands.
And
I mean, that's as big as the building.
fair enough.
I mean, it just doesn't make practical sense.
Well, it is an existing code in the city of Plymouth. It's pretty much based off that. The only difference is we're having it kick in at 3,000 feet instead of 6,000 square feet. But other than that, it is basically the same code in Plymouth. So they and they do that across the board. That's pretty much every use that they require that for. It's not something specific to churches. So I do think it's something that people will adapt to. The reality is from a planning standpoint, I'm trying to minimize the impact of a parking lot that's built for Christmas Day. And the reality is the rest of the year, it barely gets used.
Yeah.
So if they need that big of a parking lot, and keep in mind, there's also an impervious surface limit, but if they need that big of a parking lot, they need to break it up with some landscaping. So it's not just a gray parking lot looking at us all year.
Yeah. Okay. Page 4, then under 5C again. So the last part, such islands shall be bound by concrete curbing unless comparable green infrastructure is approved. Can you please just define for me what green infrastructure is?
It's allowing for some flexibility. I think that there could be
Is that like
room.
an insurmountable curb?
Insurmountable, I think it's the concrete, like if there's a different material, it doesn't necessarily need to be concrete. We would still want curbing around it. We wouldn't want.
Boulders?
I don't really know. I don't know if I had boulders.
I mean, I've never heard that term. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to, we were talking about definitions and
Yeah.
I've just, what is a green infrastructure?
Well, I actually had that question too when reading it, does it mean green in the sense of sustainability? That was actually going to be my question. Or did it just mean green in terms of like naturally more environmental?
Yeah,
You know.
so I think the idea was, or I know my idea was concrete is this pervious surface.
Yeah.
I don't want to discourage, I'm sorry, it's an impervious surface. I don't want to discourage pervious surface, especially as technology changes. So I'm saying if there's something comparable that you don't want to use concrete, but you have something comparable that will provide that curbing, then let's talk. And it gives us some flexibility to adapt as things continue to change.
I one time, long time ago, I had a client that had a corporate headquarters and they were they actually had a big wetland and a trail system that they built through, and it's quite remarkable. But when they built this thing and as they added on, they made sure that their parking lots were friendly to wildlife. And they built, surmountable curbs, the
Ah.
flat ones, so that like turtles,
Sure.
can crawl over it. They all of a sudden don't have a 6 or 8 inch curb going straight up. And
Okay.
I could see you calling that,
The infrastructure.
animal friendly or nature friendly.
Sure.
I wouldn't say it was green,
I-
but I that's what I was wondering is,
I think it could be something someone could come in and propose, and then we'd be able to have discretion if that would qualify for it. I think that is the idea of green infrastructure, and especially green infrastructure is supposed to help with the drainage of the site, and it's supposed to help with things like,
okay,
adapting to wildlife. So I think it'd be something that we could look at on an actual proposal in front of us if they're going to propose that. Most likely, they're going to come in with concrete curbing because that's what people are used to.
okay. Under,
We do have some different language in our parking standards that maybe we could look at before the council meeting,
Okay.
but it doesn't say green.
Could it just say comparable curbing?
Yeah, that's what it
Comparable?
says in the parking section.
Yeah, instead of-
today.
Sure.
So
Well, you
it's
instead
like-
of comparable green infrastructure, just comparable curbing.
Sure.
Well, I think too, we had mentioned at a previous meeting about doing like tree trenches or curb cuts. Like the city of Minneapolis is coming back and redoing a number of the ways that they line their sidewalks and their streets too. So I get what you're saying when you allude to, I mean, if that's what you meant, the green infrastructure, because it is a way of capturing stormwater and repurposing that to actually water your landscaping so that
Exactly.
you're saving money on what's being dumped into the stormwater systems. And so,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's kind of the idea, like you can use like tree filter boxes and things like that to help facilitate drainage on site. And then that can help minimize flooding in the area. So it's like trying to encourage people to think outside of the box where we might not necessarily have all those answers right now because things are changing rapidly in this field, so.
Okay, again, on page 4, under 8, additional requirements C, just for clarification and clarity, that is our safe harbor provision.
That is the safe harbor provision. I looked up best practices for including it and they said you should include it verbatim. I pretty much did verbatim except for I clarified federal statute 42 instead of verbatim. It would have said this chapter, which just didn't make sense in the middle of a city code. So that's really the only words I changed, but it's a clause directly in the federal statute itself. And basically what I researched said to put it in verbatim in the city code.
Mhm. I find this interesting in that I think there's, and again, I don't have the legal mind.
Mr. Chair, to be clear, we have this authority whether or not we include this.
I understand, I understand. that.
Okay, but yeah, it's just, again, clarity, and it's just calling it out so that we don't avoid confusion later on that we do have this authority.
Yeah, I just, I find it interesting that there seems to be, again, without real, strict definitions and stuff, a policy or practice that results in a substantial burden on religious exercise, I'm looking for words and actions or anything in our policy in and of itself, in this ordinance that somebody could say, again, that's why I went to the parking thing. I'm like, well, could the church easily just come and say, this is a substantial burden, this parking lot thing,
To be fair,
or the landscape.
I think it could, if they wanted to try to create pushback on it using this clause, they would do that either way.
Mhm.
The reality is what I found in doing some research on when they have been successful or when substantial burden cases have been successful in favor of places of worship, usually it's much more of an infringement on their right to exercise. So saying that requiring landscaping infringes on their ability to exercise religious use, I think with us having clear findings of fact, showing why we have these standards in place and having a clear defined goal of protecting the nearby residential areas, I think that we would make the case from there, and we would just have to decide on a case-by-case basis if someone comes in and does have a valid agreement or valid argument, sorry. But the city attorney has been drafting these with me, and we have really good findings of fact, we think, proposed. So we believe we've done everything that we can to provide something that protects our residential areas while allowing for clear standards for these uses to go in.
Okay.
Mr.
Last,
Chair?
Yes,
If I
sir.
could just quickly comment on that.
Please
I agree with staff. I think it was an excellent move to include this verbatim. I agree with staff also that the city would have this protection, whether or not it's in our code or not. I think the importance of including it is, let's say if we have a limitation and we have an applicant who claims an undue burden and they decide to sue us. And let's say we research it and we determine, well, by golly, they have a point here. I think we made a mistake. As long as we correct whatever mistake we made, once that correction is made, we no longer have liability. So I think that this should be included if for no other reason than simply risk management. So if we have created a condition that violates federal law and we have an applicant suing us for millions of dollars, we can cure that by simply correcting our code.
Well,
Or exempting them.
Or exempting.
yeah, well, and again, I get just any one of our particular things with the landscape or the parking lot and things like that. If there's a cost that they just can't meet and they say that kills our project, it's not a mistake because it's in our ordinance. So it's not a
The burden
mistake.
is on them.
It's just that they just, we saw a development that went down the tubes because they can't afford $750,000 turn lane. And these are burdens that they're real and they kill projects.
And the
And
reality.
if they say your zoning, ordinance requires us to do this and it's just too much for us to handle, we can't do our project, could they make a claim? And so therefore, then what they're doing is they're coming back to the city council, and the city council then will just say, we'll exempt you from that requirement.
Theoretically, yes, that would be something that we could do. At the same time, the idea of these standards is we don't want these uses going on sites that are incompatible. And that is it, so that if they're trying to fit in a space they simply don't fit in, that's what these standards are trying to prevent.
Okay. Lastly, on page 6, there was discussion here in the middle of the page. Finally, there was also discussion regarding how to regulate accessory uses for places of worship. And I remember that in what I had brought to the last meeting, that article by the gentleman that was talking about how to put on performance standards, and he made the point in his writing that the city should it would be an error not to include specific stuff. And it wasn't in the report. It didn't make it into the language. I'm fine with that. Things like daycare, shelters, food shelves, soup kitchens, etc. So staff believes that existing zoning ordinance already provides sufficient protection for these.
Correct. So
What are those protections? Is it, okay, they want all of a sudden now they want to they want to do daycare. What can you just give me just in one example? What's the protection from the neighborhoods for a big daycare center going in at a church?
So first of all, because it's a conditional use permit already, something like that where we're talking about significant changes to their operations and traffic to the site, they would have to come in for a conditional use permit amendment at the very least. And that would require a public hearing, and it's going to be very difficult for them to say that if we want to deny a place of worship, a daycare, I don't know why we necessarily would want to, but if we did, if we had reasons why that daycare just does not fit on that site, for them to make the argument that that infringes on their right to exercise their religion is going to be an uphill battle. It's not necessarily something that's preventing them from holding services and worship. So it's something that we would have discretion over, but just because we already have it as a conditional use permit to begin with.
Okay. Now, in the motion, the redlined information between RSF1, RSF2, RSF3, and lastly, RMF1, RMF2, RMF3, et cetera, they're all identical. Okay, there's no subtle differences between them
No,
based upon, I could have gone through and read it all until I was blue in the face,
it is.
but I knew you would know
Yeah.
so that we don't have to blindly maybe take a vote or
No,
have to look at
it's,
something that,
I even had it even more difficult. It was 23 pages because I had educational facilities separated from places of worship. And the city attorney called me. He's like, we don't need to do that. So, so I eventually just was able to copy and paste it for each section. So it is the same.
all right, it's all the same. Okay, very good. Okay, that's all I had. Are there any other follow-up questions for the staff by any of our commissioners?
I would just like to acknowledge the amount of work that must have gone into this and the time and effort for anybody who contributed to it. It's when I started looking over all the red type and everything, I was thinking, wow, I can't even begin to imagine where to start with all of this. So kudos and applause to everyone who had an input on this.
Thank you.
Yes, I mean, this is our second public hearing on this, right?
Yeah. Yep.
All the information that that you garnered from the other community, and I did read it actually.
That's reassuring.
Well, yeah, I mean, but it was interesting. I didn't read all of Duluth or all of Maple Grove because,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like, man, I hope we never get that complex.
Right.
But it was interesting to see that, where the takeaways that we have are somewhat, a little bit different, and there was no one answer from
Exactly.
a single source for our, and guaranteed this will change over time.
I believe it will. Yes.
Yeah.
We'll adjust and adapt.
And to your point with some of your concerns, I'm learning, like, there's no way to legislate or create enough ordinances to always make people do the right thing. But we can certainly hope that anyone wanting to come in would really want to be upfront and honest, right, about something that was legitimately a burden.
Yep, exactly.
I was just curious, so you had removed the words assembly, but in some of these, like these RSFs that still kind of mentioned it, I didn't know if that mattered. It says the A, the kind of at the top of each one, it has the A, it says,
Oh, good catch.
I didn't know if that, so
Good
that was supposed
catch.
to, I think that's on each one.
Yep, I will take care of that. Thank you.
Oh.
The rookie comes out.
The
catch of the day.
Right at the end. Yeah, and I was thinking about that impervious surface thing, like if you ever have because it doesn't give a lot of leeway for, it just says landscaping. Because that is, if you think of soccer fields, or if you have, a lot of them do turf now, if you have like certain.
Well, and
schools.
it's undecided if some people, because I looked it up. So I looked through the code to see if we had a definition and then we didn't, but then I looked at other cities and some people, the turf is, some people define it as an impervious
Oh,
surface.
they do.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, they're meant to allow drainage, obviously,
Right.
so it's not the same, but it's also not landscaping.
right.
It's something else.
I will prepare a definition in consultation with Public Works on what we want for impervious surface. And we'll have that for city council.
McKendra, what have you seen? Or, I mean, like, what is Wayzata High School? I mean, they got a lot of
Yeah, there's a
artificial
lot.
ball fields outside.
They also have, I think, underground stormwater management. And so there's some green areas that look green that aren't because water really isn't filtering naturally. And so our stormwater rules kind of define what's impervious, and I would use that
Okay.
as our guideline. That's why I think Natalie will work with engineering. So, yeah, you can debate some of the, I have, I have shoreline property and I want to debate with my county about whether in fact my drain field is in fact impervious. They say it is, and I say it's not. but
Well, did
I lose.
Commissioner Lanterman send you the case of the Lakeshore lot on Bushaway Road on
No.
Minnetonka?
No.
Fascinating.
Oh, is that
Interesting
the-
case.
That's the green one, yes,
Bushaway Road,
yes. I'll talk to you about that after.
Yeah.
offline.
That hearing's coming up January 5th. And talked to my barber about it. He had a lot of insight. on it.
I bet they did.
Oh, yeah, he's plugged into everybody down there in Wayzata.
That explains the cut.
Got it right before Thanksgiving dinner. Yeah. Okay.
Let the barber focus. Don't talk to the barber.
That's all we do is talk. Okay, so we have a resolution approving findings of fact for an ordinance amending the text of sections 1020, 1040, 1040, et cetera, et cetera. You were going to recommend some changes. Do we need to formally address or acknowledge those in the resolution before us?
I would include that in your motion, yes. So we're adding a definition for impervious surface and removing references to assembly uses. I don't know what other.
You were adding in that existing trees could meet the requirement.
Oh, yep, I have that. Okay, yep, thank you. That was on, I didn't type it, but I wrote it on my packet. Okay, so adding existing trees and vegetation
We're gonna look at the language for green infrastructure in the parking
and
lot.
look at language for green infrastructure, infrastructure in the parking lot. Is there any other points of clarification that members of the commission had?
I don't think so.
Okay, so I have what it is that we discussed to change in the draft resolution. So if you wanted to just make a motion with edits as discussed, I think that we could get that covered.
Yep. Okay. Any other further questions or discussion before we vote? Okay. All right, do I have a motion to recommend approving the resolution?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Third. Gotta get used to the
Jinx.
process.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Recommendation is approved. All right, thanks, everybody. Okay, planning project update. You no doubt saw this and, okay.
I gathered this is like a list of, this was like a list of projects. I wasn't really, read through it, but this was like, so it looks like it's a list.
Correct. It is a list of ongoing projects that we are processing. from the planning standpoint. And then the next one is an ongoing list of things that the city council is working on and an update on their status. So basically, this planning project update provides you with an update on projects you've either seen or applications that are coming in.
I was just curious about the terminology of that number, that first one, that vacation of, like, what does that mean of the vacation of?
So it's talking about an easement vacation. So at one point, I think you're talking about the King.
Yeah, vacation of Kane Road
So,
Row.
yeah, right of way. So
Oh, right.
basically there is a right of way portion of Keene Road right away that was dedicated at one point that has never been developed as a road. It's just remained as right of way. And really, it's very unlikely that it will ever be developed as a road now that we're looking at it decades later, and there's a wetland that kind of prevents any connection to the north. So the landowner had requested that we vacate the portion of the right of way that touches his property.
Oh, like give it, like release it?
Release it back
Oh,
to him, yeah.
vacation. Oh, okay.
So, and that, there hasn't been much movement on that. I was actually going to reach out to the applicant this month to see what he wanted to do, because we're kind of landlocked with that one, but.
Can you, item 10, for those commissioners, I was at the last city council meeting for personal reasons. But I did watch a couple of these sketch plan reviews. And so the one by Pulte Homes, which is being proposed for the Eagle Brook Church site, was interesting. But I just, out of point of clarification, it says here the application is scheduled for council review on November 22nd. So that was the meeting that I was at. Do they actually have an application for a sketch plan review?
Yep, we have an application process for sketch plan review, and they have to submit fees and escrow for it. Yep.
Okay. All right.
What is the escrow money used for?
To cover the review costs for staff review, consultant review. Sometimes it goes to other miscellaneous costs. Like I've had some, if they have leftover escrow and they have like wetland buffer signs, they can request to pay it from their escrow. So it just covers additional costs.
So does that go toward paying city employees, or does that go toward paying a landform?
Both,
both.
as well as a city engineer through Stantec,
Okay,
and the city attorney as well.
okay, thank you.
But, it's interesting. So I thought that the sketch plan review process was to allow a developer to get input before significant costs were invested by the city as well as the developer. So doesn't it, I mean, why is there an application? I mean, I'm not trying to argue for changing the system here, but I guess I'm a little confused as to
There's still meetings that we
how is this official? I thought the idea was, hey, we're gonna brush this by you, tell us what you think, and we'll do it 3 or 4 times if necessary, so you can give us input before we start putting a bunch of money into the idea.
So concept plans are significantly cheaper than a preliminary plat and final plat process. And we still have several meetings with them the costs need to be covered. And we still have to do a staff report, and we have to get it through council. So some of those, like the actual council meeting is covered in the fee. So that's like an administrative charge, overhead charge. But as far as staff review and staff time to have meetings to inform the concept plan, to ideally get it to something that council will give the thumbs up to, that all costs money. So it's still cheaper than submitting a preliminary plat that gets denied because you didn't even bother to get an opinion in the first place, which can totally happen. So.
But I'm sure that we've discussed this before. See, so when you just said so that they get the thumbs up,
Well,
but then it comes to the planning commission. So it's almost like, well, you can meet with the city council and we can do all this review as long as it's a sketch plan.
mhm.
But then it goes through the review process as normal, and there might be significant changes there.
Correct. And maybe thumbs up was too much of a word, but it would
Because I'm
allow,
sure
it would.
Cook
al-
Lake Estates probably figured out.
And it did, yeah, but it does allow for feedback. So if they come with something and the answer is hard no, we don't want any townhomes here, that's not going to work, then they don't proceed with the preliminary plat process, which would be like the preliminary final plat, that escrow alone is $10,000. So that is much more significant than I think the like 1,200 we require for a concept plan. So it does prevent waste of time if it's a hard no, and it provides feedback that they can incorporate. And there's still definitely, it's not a hard yes because a public hearing needs to be held, duly held, and you don't want.
Well, I know it's not hard, yes.
Yeah, but-
We're talking about perceptions, and I've seen people that have gone through this process that had a perception that they were fully backed by a city council to do something, and then they went through the formal process, and then they found out they got a new council, they
Yeah,
got
well,
a
and
new
it-
planning commission,
New
and the
council.
answer is no.
So, Mr. Chair, are you suggesting we should eliminate the sketch plan?
Oh, no,
process?
no, I just couldn't understand the formality of it, that's all.
Yeah, because the
I did-
alternative, if we.
I didn't know there was a formality to it.
If we didn't charge a fee, the taxpayers would pay for it out of the general fund, and we feel like in Corcoran, the council said it's a pay as you go. So that's why there's that fee, so it will cover the staff cost for Natalie to review and write a staff report of myself and to engage. them.
Yeah.
So,
No, I mean, I totally understand that. I didn't know that there was fees and an application to that process. I thought everybody's here on their own dime and time. That's all, so. Any other questions?
Just again, the terminology question. So number 13, MS4 ordinance amendments. What's MS4?
I wish I could tell you what that acronym stands
Oh.
for. I forget. It's something to do with grading. It's required by the state. So it'll be coming in front of you. I will know the acronym for January because I'll probably have to
Some
write it
state,
1,000 times.
is it required?
But it's a state requirement for grading. Yeah, it's basically how we handle grading for sites over 1 acre, and it's a permitting process.
Graded, like grading, not.
Yeah,
like-
grading.
Like you got an A,
Yeah.
grading. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
okay.
so it's a permit, basically the state has certain requirements and the city has to facilitate the permit, and so we have to, there's multiple levels of permits. And we are required to update it to meet state minimums, and we're not quite at state minimum, so we have to kind of do some changes.
it doesn't stand for anything. It's the municipal stormwater permit. So.
Oh, so tied to the way, okay, for
Municipal storm- I don't know what
managing runoff.
version 4. I think
Oh, is
that's
that
what
what,
it's for.
okay, I thought
I'm
that,
not sure.
I can't remember what it is. I'm sorry. All I know is I've had several conversations with engineering about grading.
So around how we're
Yeah.
managing runoff and things.
Well, yeah, or how we're gonna enforce our permit process, yes.
And then if I can ask another question about the terminology, so number 11, what's, because I think I was mentioned in one of these other ones, is the wetland waivers, the wetland delineation waiver, what kind of stuff is that around wetlands? I mean, I live on part of my property's on a wetland, and I know there's rules on it.
So going back to the Magnet Acres application tonight,
Yeah.
we at times have allowed wetland, we require wetland delineations for most anything. If you're building a new.
What does the delineation mean?
That means we are saying, we know that this type of wetland with this quality is located exactly here on your property. So it requires a surveyor and a wetland specialist to put it on a map. And then we
Okay.
have someone from Stantec, who is a wetland specialist, who comes out and has to also review it and approve it. And because we're the local government unit that facilitates this for the
Okay.
watershed.
Okay.
So anytime there is new construction and like a preliminary plat, a wetland delineation is required.
Okay.
There-
It's sort of like validating where the wetland is,
Exactly. Well,
delineating
and
it.
sometimes Hennepin County shows that there's a probable or potential wetland and there's not. And actually that was the situation with the outlot that we looked at tonight. The Hennepin County shows that there's wetlands and there was no wetlands. So, but a wetland waiver is a process that the city has in place for times where under normal circumstances, we would require wetland delineation, but you're not proposing to do anything different with your lot, so it seems like we really don't need it. So we go ahead and have a waiver process. So that's what that is.
Thank you. I think I'm good.
See, Kendra?
Mhm.
So, the garages too,
Mhm.
right? So that has been recently acted on and will be closed out. It was approved. And one of the reasons that the planning commission recommended denial was because they felt that the development should not take place ahead of the availability of sewer and water, even though that applicant did not need or want sewer and water. So I watched then the other night, the sketch plan review for Highway 55 Business Park. Right? And it kind of went along the same thing. You guys want to build 500,000 square feet of industrial space, but sewer and water isn't there yet. And as I sat and listened to this whole discussion about whether or not the city has the option to maybe deny this, even though they want it eventually. That's the one difference. They want it, but they're right next door to each other. Haven't we already set precedents in garages too?
Well, Mr. Chair, as you've heard me say many times, no variance sets a precedent because it's based on the unique circumstance of that application.
Yeah.
But I think the council did say they felt that it was not a premature subdivision and that they supported the concept plan and encouraged the applicant to move forward with an application that would include a variance from the standards that require municipal sewer and water.
Okay. The only thing I could think of was, I don't know why this is even an issue, that they should be granted the variance because we just did it for another, and the largest portion of this development that they're talking about is more of like the Park Place storage units. It's the same developer. And they're going to have a majority of this thing is going to be that. And
So at a certain point, when the city grants a lot of variances, should the council grant this variance, I can guarantee, because I've been talking to several other landowners, they're going to get a couple of other variance requests. And if you're granting a lot of variances, then you should change your code. And so that may be something that comes out of this, that we just say,
yeah.
Go for it.
Okay. All right, good. All right. Any other questions? All right, well, let's move on to item 8B, schedule planning commissioner training date. I know that was canceled previously and we're looking to reschedule it. Is there a proposed date?
I don't. I can tell you that January 11th, we are planning to have a landowners meeting with the Northeast for the Northeast District Corridor Planning Project, and you all are encouraged to come. So let's not do it January
Is that up
11th.
by the Dayton?
Yes, it's
That's not central. It's not.
the Northeast District. So it's Shetty Road, the north of Shetty Road up to the Rogers border. And then the Musa line to County Road 101.
That's where the moratorium is currently.
That is the Northeast District, and we're doing a corridor planning for that
Okay.
as part of the reason for the moratorium.
Okay,
So I spoke with someone at Hope Church about potentially getting space for a community meeting on January 11th. I'll have to follow up with her tomorrow. So more to come on that, but just saying that date probably won't work.
I suppose we don't have our community room anymore.
I know. So Tuesday, January 11th, I think is off the table, but maybe still keep on your calendar. And then as far as another alternative date, I believe Tuesdays or Mondays work best for me. I don't know. I think Kendra is also available. So
it depends.
yeah. So if there is a date in January that you all might be able to work around, then let's do it.
When's the Super Bowl?
I don't know.
Yeah, let's schedule it that day.
Maybe Tuesday, the 18th, that could be a possibility. We can't, I would say maybe we don't want it the last week of January because the ultrasound showing the baby is gonna be born February 2nd. So we're cutting it really close.
Hmm.
What about in front of the January meeting?
Training/baby shower.
It's a great way to get that baby to come. Just plan something.
Right. I don't even know if I'm gonna make it to that February planning commission meeting. I'm like, can we just hold on one more day? But at the same time, I think February 2nd, 2022 would be such a cool birthday.
Hospitals have meeting rooms.
Oh,
Let's give her the day
Yeah,
off.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because
Okay.
otherwise you've got,
Well,
you know,
Thursdays
you got
don't
meetings,
work.
well, you
Yeah.
got meetings on Thursdays, so.
Yeah, so, and I would say,
So Tuesday or Wednesday would be probably best for city staff, right?
yeah, Tuesday or Wednesday. So we could do either we could double up on planning commission meetings the first week of January, either the 4th or the 5th, and just get it out of the way. Or we could look at the 18th or 19th.
You're saying hold it before our meeting on the 6th?
Or have a second meeting that week and just double up on planning commission meetings that week.
Okay. Well, I don't, you know, I might be out of town snowmobiling in January, but that's weekend stuff, so. Any day is fine with me. But if anybody has a conflict, maybe you can let Natalie know.
You said Mondays and Tuesdays were good originally, but now looking at it and thinking about the staff, it'd be Tuesday, Wednesdays.
I think we could, Kendra's
Right.
kind of all over the place, but we could,
Right.
yeah, so I think what's most important to us at this point is we would like everybody to be there. I'm the one that's doing the presentation. I prepared it. I'd like Kendra to be there if we can make it work, but technically I have everything ready to go. So,
I can make it Tuesday or a Wednesday. It's just a little trickier
I think we'd pick a date, but, would,
with some advance.
how do you, okay, so do we?
Mondays are, I mean, if we're asking, Mondays are the best.
Mondays are
I'm
the
gonna say Mondays are the
Oh,
best,
do we
but
wanna do
Wednesdays would be
Mondays-
second best.
Mondays the 17th, is everyone available Monday the 17th?
Are you available?
Oh my goodness, I'm not available.
I mean,
have
I'm
the day
working,
off.
but you're probably.
Or we could do Wednesday, the 19th. Would that work for you, Commissioner Brumman? As far as
I can make Wednesday work, yeah.
What did you say, Wednesday? the
She is
19th?
proposing
Yeah.
the 19th of January, Wednesday,
That's
January
fine.
19th.
Wednesday 19th?
I can't make that.
You can't?
Can you make January 5th?
Yes.
Or the 18th, you were saying?
You make, but I think she said, yeah, Tuesdays aren't ideal for her. So we could, if everyone can do
Sorry.
January, no, that's fine. January the 5th would work for me.
It's a Wednesday.
Yeah, that's a Wednesday.
Again, fine for me.
Mhm.
Right in the middle of the week, so you shouldn't be snowmobiling or.
I'd like to be, I mean,
What
Nowadays,
time
you're-
are you proposing for this?
I'm sorry. say again.
What time are you proposing?
You know, like how long is this?
Well, we could do it, I'm hoping it won't be more than 2 hours. We could do, it depends on what your guys' work schedule. I'd love to do it at 5 o'clock because it minimizes the time that I'm here, but if we need to extend it later into the evening, then we can.
I'm available
I'm available.
early or
Mhm.
whenever that needed.
Right, well, then let's do January the 5th at 5 o'clock, but if conflicts come up between now and then, please just let me know right away. I just would, ideally, I want to make sure that you all can make it, so.
Are we reserving January 18th as a secondary date then? That was another one that was thrown out, like,
Are you able to make it on a Tuesday?
my son and my husband are both in Civil Air Patrol, so they're,
Oh, sure.
right, they meet on Tuesdays, but I could potentially with some advance notice locate a babysitter.
So maybe
So, yeah,
a
I
second.
can.
Yeah.
If that's a
we can
secondary
do a
date.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Unless you can.
I can't do the entire third week of January.
Oh,
Okay,
okay,
so
all right, so
never
that won't
mind.
work.
Okay,
So let's just hope for January 5th and we'll go from there.
All right, January 5th.
Yep, at 5 o'clock.
All right, well. Send out an invite or info and
Sure.
everybody can look at their calendars and give you some feedback.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's move on to item 8C, City Council Report. Councilor Nichols.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to address the commission. Welcome to our newest new member and our oldest new member. Maybe that's not the right term. But thank you to all for volunteering your time, and thank you for the new folks who have joined the commission recently. Going through the list, maybe I'll give you guys a chance to ask questions on specific items first. I saw 4 that I thought you might want some background and commentary on, but I'll see if you have any specific topics you would like to discuss first. Okay, hearing none. The first one I thought you might be interested in is on page 1 of 3, the rezoning site plan and conditional use permit for garages 2. And Commissioner Jacobs referenced that a little bit ago. In addition to the overall approval, one thing that I was pleased with was the council had a relatively strong, I think, consensus that we wanted to try to do something in that area to address some latent stormwater issues, where even in the existing configuration, there are challenges for some of those residents, likely due to just the way the neighborhood was originally laid out in the late 1970s. So we seem to have consensus that we wanted staff to come back with a proposal that the city would undertake in collaboration with the developer to ensure we can try to clean up as much of that as we can in parallel with the approval. And we have talked with staff in the past. Hopefully early in 2022, there'll be a proposal from Public Works on developing a stormwater fee that we can use to start accumulating funds for those kinds of projects to deal with some of those longstanding issues. The second item was on page 2. There's a note for the November 2nd meeting. We had the work session to discuss the proposed urban conservation subdivision ordinance. That will be coming to you folks, I believe, early in January. And since many of you are newer to the commission, I would suggest if you're looking for some background on it, there was a really good feedback session that was recorded on August 26th of this year, where we had 2 different developers come in person and speak with council about their impressions from that proposal. There have been some minor tweaks since that point. I know we gave some feedback to Kendra looking toward some modifications to housing types that would be permitted. But largely the proposal will be similar to the one that we got feedback on. So if you're looking for some more discussion on how this might actually work in practice, that would be a good session to look at. The third one was also on page 2, the preliminary plat and variance approval for Bechtold Farm. We did review that, and actually there was a fair bit of discussion around how to handle some trail easements on that site. And I wanted to thank Commissioner Jacobs for contacting several of us and reviewing that ahead of time a little bit and helping us familiarize ourselves with the issues involved. And I think ultimately we did end up with a pretty good approach there. And I also want to thank staff for their patience with council as we worked our way through it. The last one that I thought you might want to discuss a bit was the approval for St. Teresa's preliminary plat. And I just wanted to raise an issue. I know we talked earlier in this session, or sorry, the commission talked earlier in this session about ordinance updates on a couple other topics. One that came up as a potential need in the future that was raised by St. Teresa was the landscape requirements that were requiring a pretty significant number of trees to be installed because of the square footage of the site. And we'll probably see more challenges like that in that downtown district because of the multi-story nature of the buildings and the smaller natures of the footprints that those buildings will be on. So we'll probably in 2022 want to look at some kind of an objective around a code modification to deal with how we can still meet the intent of that ordinance to enhance our natural spaces and landscaping in areas where we have multi-story buildings and not have to do variances continually, whether that's allowing trees to be installed off-site or some kind of other fund that they could contribute to if there's not room on a site for the required number of landscape items. Those were the only topics I thought you might want to discuss further. Are there any questions or need for dialogue on any of those?
I have a question. I see here a firearm ordinance update. This must have slipped by me. This is the first I'm seeing this. Where do I go to find a copy of the working draft of this?
I don't think there is a working draft yet. All that the council discussed was a couple of incidents that occurred in the last year or so. And we identified a subcommittee of the council to work with Matt and Lieutenant Burns to develop some updates. So if you're looking for further feedback and to have input, I would direct you to Matt.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Nichols or Councilor Nichols, so related to St. Therese, as we looked again with some of the setbacks in the accessory use, the concept of screening, trees, landscape. I really, the more and more I think about it, I think it would be a good option to allow, and we've talked about this recently, to allow a applicant to maybe exchange the requirements of smaller overstory trees or bushes with the option of putting in bigger trees, i.e. spaded trees, something that's 10 feet, 12 feet. I would like to see, it would be nice maybe to see something in the concept plans or the changes to our landscaping requirements that would give people that option.
Yeah,
And it might
I don't disagree. I think
the
an
best
enhanced credit might make sense. Yeah, that we should certainly be open to that as one of the choices.
And, again, I think maybe in certain cases, it's the best option because, maybe something needs to be screened more immediately and taller with less area than, putting in a bunch of little trees, because the developer is always going to do that. I happen to be driving down the road down by Holy Name Lake, and there's some houses that are being put in there. And this guy's got a driveway. It's probably about a half mile long, but he spaded in these maple trees all along. I don't even know if the house is even built yet, but I mean, what a dramatic difference, versus, just doing a ball and burlap.
Yeah.
It was stunning to see the sudden impact that he made on that landscape, and it was a bare field. But just lining that driveway with all these trees, I'm sure it was expensive, but it really was a nice feature that he added, that he got he got bang for the buck right away.
Yeah, I don't want to prejudge the options, but I certainly want to consider it. And we'll be looking to Natalie to come up with some great suggestions to add to that, I think.
Yeah. So we are short a full-time or a designated city manager. What is the timeline for the city council to look for a replacement for Mr. Martins?
So there's a multi-step schedule that was in the last packet. It will end, I believe, in April is the target. We're trying to get RFPs from different recruiting firms that may change that timeline depending upon which one we select and how long we believe it will take to complete. But at this point, we're hoping to have it done around April or so.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. That's all the questions I had. Anybody else?
No.
All right. Well, Councilor Nichols, thank you again for a fine update and prioritizing that. It certainly makes for a quicker discussion. Thank you very much. And if anybody has any other questions, you can always send them an email.
Very true. Thank you all.
Okay. Item 8D, other business. Any other business? Nope. Okay. Item 9, Commissioner Liaison Calendar. So Commissioner Van in 90. this calendar is a liaison position that you would attend on your designated date to go to the city council meeting.
Right.
Or virtually attend.
Or you can virtually
Oh, like
attend.
he did, yeah.
Yeah. And you know, what it is, you know, if there's something that we've discussed, you know, and you want to bring clarity to it, or if they have a question directly for the planning commission liaison, they will ask you and you're there to provide insight about how our discussion went or something to that nature. And I see here you have already been scheduled on February 24th. Now, if you have a conflict, we've never had any difficulty in switching things up.
Okay.
All right. So
Great.
just let us know. I mean, that's still a ways away, but if you have a conflict, please let us know as soon as possible and we can. So Commissioner Scholak, you're up next on the 9th, and then Commissioner Brummond. Still okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
That
Okay,
is a Wednesday, that's why it's in red.
Yeah.
Okay.
that's Eggnog Wednesday too.
To
Right before
acknowledge
Christmas.
the-
Also close to Christmas, so the red kind of goes,
Yep.
little green in there would have been good.
Oh, shoot, I should have done the other one's green.
Yeah. Okay, well, if there's no changes to the schedule, Chair will take a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I'll make that motion.
I have a second.
I will second it.
All right, all those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Amen.
Okay.